What is up, Hot Take Nation? It is DRW here. Welcome to the show. Hot Take over your commute has been busy and active, and the Hot Take of the Day podcast is going to get pretty crazy here in the next couple weeks. We have a lot of great guests. We're going to talk about hedging. We're going to talk about the commodity flows of products around the world. We're going to talk about what it's like to come into the creepy basement, having no context to that before. But before we do that, this week I'm traveling down to Oklahoma. And, as we know, Oklahoma's probably been the state that's been the hardest hit in terms of everything going on with the downturn. A lot of rigs are down about 65-70% from the beginning of 2018, but rather the beginning of 2019. Completions are down. A lot of service companies have closed their offices, and it's just been really tough. So tomorrow I'm giving a speech. I'm quite excited about meeting a whole bunch of folks down there and just chatting about issues with the oil and gas industry. But you add what's going on in Oklahoma, and again this week there were some layoffs in Denver. I know there's layoffs in Houston. There's been layoffs in Midland. It's a really tough time to be in oil and gas. And, as much as I'd like to give encouraging words that mean something and not just say, hey, it's going to be okay. I know a lot of people out there are going through a tough time, and some of you might go through a tough time. So today, for something different, I thought we would read a chapter from the book that was really, as you know, if you've followed the Hot Take for a while, the book is very different from the Hot Take of the Day personality and quite honestly, the Hot Take of the Day speaker. They're all the same guy, but when I got fired in 2012, and it sort of set me on the entrepreneurial journey, which has brought me to here, which is where the your career is a river kind of comes from. It was a really tough and dark day, February 1st, and I know people have read about it, but there's a chapter in the book that I just called Ouch. I think I wrote it February 2nd, 2012. At the time, I wasn't a writer. I was certainly not an author. And I process by talking, and I process by writing, as I think most of you know by now. And so this is what flowed out. And I thought for the people who are maybe going through a tough time, or helping friends go through a tough time, I thought I'd share my experience, and I hope it's helpful. So here we go. Have you ever been fired? Well, the polite thing for me to say is, I hope not. That's actually not how I feel about it. I kind of hope you have. Not because I'm in a petty in misery loves company kind of way, but because it's pretty humbling and eye-opening. Can you even imagine my ego before being fired? Exactly. If you have been fired, I hope it's only happened once. Personally, and I say this having given a significant amount of thought on the subject, I think one firing per lifetime is enough. Maybe even one firing per family would be acceptable, and you can include your in-laws if you'd like. Of course, it's important to acknowledge the HR thing to say here is that there's a difference between being fired, laid off, downsized, and severed, or, in politically correct terms, involuntarily separated. But tomato, one person's firing is another person's severing. For me, firing is what happens when there exists a disagreement in the direction at the senior levels of a company, and you, the junior of that team, are the one who discovers what it means to be fired. I'm sure there are other events in your life that are equally impactful, but none that influence your day-to-day life quite so drastically. After all, we spend more time awake at work than we do anywhere else in our adult lives. In 2012, I realized how much time I spent at work when I came home to a family I hadn't spent much time with over the course of the past few years, and had to sit down and explain to them starting at midnight that they no longer were covered with reasonable healthcare insurance, and why in spite of years of absence, I would not be going back to work tomorrow because I no longer worked there. The event, as I refer to it, even more politically correct than involuntary separation, is a massive shock to your soul. Nothing says failure quite like the termination of income when you have a mortgage, a wife who gave up her career to raise kids so that you could focus on yours, and a 4 and a 6-year-old who know you live with them, but they aren't totally sure what your role is. Being fired lends perspective to where you are in life, how you define yourself, and gives you the opportunity, which when written in Mandarin is the same character as crisis, if you didn't know, to reset and chart a new course. I did not have this perspective in the days and weeks that followed, but the sun did rise, life did go on, and for the first time in a very long time, I was forced to look at my life and evaluate it for what it was, not what I planned on it being a few short weeks before. I believe that few other things in life allow you to do that. If you haven't been fired, I don't think that you totally understand what I'm saying. People learn best by doing, or in this case, by being done. In my big company days, I'd fired more than my fair share of people, but I didn't understand it until I experienced it myself. I like to think that I did it better, but fired is fired like dead is dead. It sucks to be fired. I imagine if you've never been fired, you're going to smile, but maybe not entirely absorb what I'm saying. Regardless, I'll still share my learnings with you because being fired was a huge turning point for me, and well, I like you. I really like you. You're reading my book and we get to know each other. Accordingly, if I can help you so that I can be the in-law you take credit for, and you don't have to be fired to find happiness in your new course, then it was worth it. The days that followed the event were the hardest few of my life. That I remember particularly clearly. I'd been stressed out, miserable, working 16-hour days, 7 days a week, by choice, of course, in the months and perhaps years leading up to it. But nothing could compare to how I felt in the days that followed. In my mind, January 31st, the day before I got fired, I had purpose. I knew what 6:15 a.m. meant. I knew what I was going to do every day with every crisis. I was important. I was creating millions of dollars of value every single day for the organization in an asset I'd built from scratch. I was the captain with 2 or 3 trusted lieutenants, and we had the answers to everything. And then it was gone. Healthcare taken away at midnight, no place to go during the day, absolutely no idea what I was going to do. I went from a job that pulled me in 20 different directions all simultaneously that I'd willingly sacrificed my personal life for, to absolutely nothing. As I write this today, I'm appalled to know that that's how I felt, but I know it to be true. There were 2 little boys who hadn't really seen their father in years, and I wasn't particularly present when I was, because I was too busy and important with other things to think about. And now I didn't even have a job to show for it. Don't worry, boys, university's overrated anyway. As for marriage, I had a wife at home who'd given up her career, moved countries, had endured some pretty tough times with the husband she had, a husband that was significantly different than the one she'd chosen to marry, taking care of 2 little boys basically on her own. Till death do us part, they say. In 2012, she was strongly contemplating the death part for me. In the few weeks prior to the events, I'd told my wife that I wouldn't be joining the family on a 10-day trip to Hawaii, a trip that had been booked for over a year. My reason? I couldn't be away from work that long. Her entire family was going. I wasn't. Divorce was imminent, and I didn't care. I surmised with 100% confidence that she was planning on packing the kids up and moving back to Canada upon her return from Hawaii. I also knew that I was staying in Denver to continue my career. Some might say I'm exaggerating the divorce part since I've been known to embellish on occasion, so it's important to know that I have subsequently confirmed that this is the case. In fact, my wife and my kids would not have passed go. They would not have come to Denver. They would have collected more than a few $100s on the way back to Canada, and they were going for good. And then the event happened. For me, my first thought was not of my life, my family, or the free time I was about to have. It was not about the relief that I would have no longer having to fight every day at the office with people who took for granted what I did for the company and the direction I wanted to take it. It was not even about the inequity of my own personal perception of value and what I received to leave. No, it was that going to work on February 2nd, no emails, no phone calls, no meetings, no decisions, no lunches with salesmen, no dinners with vendors. It would be just me, my family, the 4 of us, in a house we could no longer afford, looking at the three of us looking at each other and wondering, who is this guy sitting across from us on the couch, and why does he look so sad? My entire self-worth, my entire purpose, and all the years I'd spent building this career gone in a moment. I'm quite confident that there were people on both sides of the aisle that cheered that day. On the left, those that I'd pushed at work, the B and C players that I quite frankly could have been more patient with, cheered because I was gone and their daily lives became easier. Karma, payback, and the hubris police had simultaneously caught up with me, and in the world, there was justice. Work isn't everything, calm the fuck down. I just want to do my job and go home. Leave me alone and stop emailing me at 8:30 at night. It's stressing me out. On the right, those that were closest to me cheered too. More quietly, of course, but hopeful. Haven't thought about this for a while. But hopeful that the David that I used to be would return, and that the person I'd become would be rocketed back to outer space from whence he came. Remember that guy that power washed the paint off the wrong deck? That was funny. Tell that story again. It always makes me laugh when you tell it. Why don't you tell it that way anymore? Please come back. The job, my career, and the choices I made had morphed who I was. In the opening blogs and in past hot takes, I may have characterized it as unhappy. We didn't know each other that well back then, and now I feel like our relationship has really grown, so I can say it. I was an asshole. Not a mean asshole, just a one-dimensional, self-important, confused asshole. And I'm pretty sure I wasn't going to change. So it's ironic, of course, that being fired saved what little of my personal life I had left. It also was the reason I now drop off my kids at school every day, coach them at hockey, head the fundraising efforts for their school, and I'm on the PTA, hosting the auction. But on February 2nd, 2012, I got up like every other workday with a few small differences. My eyes were red, I was hollowed out from the inside, and I hurt because I had absolutely no place to go. So I put on my suit, went downtown, and had coffee with, 15 or 20 people, all of whom were former colleagues. For some reason, I was looking for validation. From some, I was hoping for a job offer. But more than anything, I needed to get back in control of my life, and this seemed like a pretty good place to start. I ended up extremely overcaffeinated. I ended the worst day of my life, went home, and started writing. I now know that being fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. At the time, I didn't have that perspective. I did, however, have anger and needed validation of myself and a structure for that anger. I needed an outlet, and fortunately, I had a killer title and a first chapter. I'm thankful I did. So, there you go. For all those who are going through pain, I can tell you that there is light at the other side of the tunnel. For all those who've been waiting for the audible of the book, you may have to wait a little bit longer. I might read some chapters. I might read some chapters at a time. But look, your career isn't your life, and your career does not define who you are. And you have family, and you have friends, and you have things that you've probably put off to the side while you've been thinking about your career that you now get a chance to explore. And yeah, the industry's tough. And yeah, a lot of people are going through hard times, and our industry is shrinking. But the economy is the lowest unemployment rate we've ever seen. Technology, opportunities abound, and they might not be in the industry. But what I can tell you is that the most important part of that story and of my journey from 2012 was that the hot take person that now exists only exists because I was freed from the corporate bounds and the person that I thought people wanted me to be, and the validation of myself based on my career. And I became the fun guy that I was in college, the guy that swore at speeches, that I was reminded the other day apparently did a striptease in class for no apparent reason in front of the professor on stage. And I don't think that would be allowed now. And has a podcast, has a hot take, and hopefully is making people's lives a little bit more enjoyable. And so with that, we'll end this week's edition. Like I said, we have a lot of guests coming up. I think we're going to dive into some really interesting technical issues with commodity price, with basins, with hedging, with what it's like to work in the oil field. So I'm really excited about those shows. The best way for the oil and gas industry to get a face is not only this podcast, but all the podcasts. If you like what you hear, go onto your podcast server, write a review. those reviews help elevate the ratings so that more than just oil and gas people are listening to this, so that they can hear that there's a face and a name behind big bad fossil fuel, and that what we're doing is making the world a better place by lowering energy costs, bringing people out of poverty, and providing the fuel for the world, which allows every other industry to thrive. So with that, you can follow us on the web, www.hottakeoftheday.com. Check out the archived blogs and podcasts. Tune in for this weekend's Hot Take Over Your Commute, which I'll be recording from a hockey tournament in San Diego. Lots to cover on that. Looking forward to it. And until next time, be safe, be good, have a great day. Bye for now.